So hopefully everyone in the ether world can see the slides now. So anyway, I was asked to talk about the history of Steidle Building. And so as a science nerd geek type of person that I've been most of my life, my first influence was this show on PBS called Connections. And I'm failing to think of the guy's name right now, but anyway, he wrote a couple of books on the show as well. You can go back on YouTube and look at them. They're not so old that they're black and white, but they're pretty old. And anyway, he always presented these stories that seemed to link seemingly unrelated things. And so I thought in that spirit, I titled my presentation, Hall of Famers, a Third-Rate President, and the Birthplace of the Greatest Math C Department in the World. And that is not hyperbole. They were Hall of Famers. And so the two Hall of Famers are actually the two probably most impactful people on our history. And I will begin with Dean Steidle. And so Dean Steidle, for those of you who don't know, was born in Williamsport, PA, and he came to Penn State to get both a master's and a bachelor's degree in mining engineering. And from there, he went and joined the newly formed U.S. Bureau of Mines. And so he started there as a research scientist, and within 5 years, he was the chief mining engineer for that branch of the government. And he was really well known. This would have been from 1912 to about 1916. And he was really well known as a man who built relationships. So he had a really great relationship with the people that worked in the mine, the people that operated the mine, and building the relationships between those two groups. The other thing that he was world renowned for was his advocacy of mining safety. And so, anyway, he was there until 1916, and then the war to end all wars started, and he joined the army and he fought in France. He was wounded 3 different times, and he earned the Victory Medal, the Pershing Citation, and a Purple Heart. So when he returned from World War I, he was still in the mining game. He went to the Carnegie Institute of Technology, and there he started building what we would consider today traditional research avenues. So he used his connections at the U.S. Bureau of Mines and the plethora of industries that were in the Pittsburgh area, and he started building funding for research and things of that nature. And so simultaneously, at the same time, Penn State was growing its mineral industries subject excellence, if you will. And really, if you don't know, Pennsylvania at that time, so in the late 20s, was the end all be all for minerals and coal and natural gas and oil, right? So we were the biggest producer for the entire country. And so President Hetzel at the time realized the importance of this industry and these sciences, and he needed a really good leader. And so he went and asked personally Dean Steidle, or Edward Steidle, to take the job. And before he did that, he did his own little investigation, and he received input from, I think it was well over a dozen industry leaders and government types who are like, yeah, this is the guy you want. And so Edward Steidle became dean of then the School of Mines in 1928, and he had a vision. And his vision was unifying the mineral sciences and engineering under one roof. And so one of his first acts was to actually go to the Pennsylvania state government and ask for $500,000 to build Steidle Building. And so he was awarded that money. And if you're curious, $500,000 in 1929 is roughly 8.7 million in today's money. And that began the building of Steidle. And before I get into that, as I've been reading on the history of Edward Steidle, the parallels to what's happening now were just sort of like, whoa, all right. Dean Steidle was a prolific writer in both mining safety, but also the philosophy of education for engineers and technicians and engaging with the public. And so the big thing he did is he turned the School of Mines into the School of Industry, Mineral Industries, and that's the title on the front door of the building. It didn't become Steidle until 78. He passed away in 77. And so in the School of Mineral Industries, he had three essentially goals. He said, we must provide residential education. We must provide research and training of more advanced, more knowledgeable, in-depth subject matters. And he started this because shortly after he took over the deanship, Pennsylvania started losing its footing as the mineral and oil leader of the country. And so, but he wanted to keep that strong point here at Penn State. And then he said, we must be involved in extension, which in current today's terminology, at least in this college, I would call that service, right? Providing our expertise to the general population. And so, so within the School of Mineral Industries, there was the section of earth sciences, mineral engineering, and mineral technologies. And mineral technologies was the home of ceramics and metallurgy. And he has this really, and so his concept, right, was residential education, research and specialization, extension, and none of those are above the other, right? And he has this really interesting quote, I had to write it down. He said, it will be remembered that weavers use a loom to unite many diverse strands into a useful and attractive cloth, a product far better than the warp or the woof alone. And if you don't know weaving, the warp is the fabric that's going in this direction, and the woof is what you're weaving through it with a shuttlecock. So he's saying that, we're making this thing that's useful and it's beautiful and it's much bigger than the sum of its parts. And he basically went on to then say, using all the subject matter fields in a mineral college will accomplish the like effect. Another thing that he was very well known for was his advocacy for the liberal arts. And so the curriculum back in the day was very much what it looks like now. The first 2 years of an undergraduate's education were all about liberal arts and the fundamental sciences. And then his thought was that after 2 years of that, a student could choose their technical or non-technical path if it came to that, based on that introduction of education. But he knew, and he expressed a lot, that that pursuing mineral industries and engineering and sciences was very much a humanistic endeavor. And in order for it to be successful, the people practicing it also had to be able to relate to the general public. And so, so it's really fascinating that he was very much an interdisciplinary guy, which is extremely what we are in this college, right? And that he was very much a proponent of a well-rounded education, for which Penn State is pretty well known. I mean, any of the undergraduates out there know the significant number of gen ed credits you have to take. So this brings us to the other Hall of Famer. So, I didn't say that, but Steidle was inducted into the National Mining Hall of Fame. So the architect chosen for Steidle was Charles Clowder. And these are some early images from the building of Steidle. You can see where they're digging out up here in the top left, excavating for the foundation of the building. And then here in the bottom right is the building being built. We occupied that building in 1929. So Charles Crowder, just a little bit on him. Interesting guy. He is a Hall of Famer in the National Academy of Architecture. And he contributed to buildings, significant landmark buildings on 15 different campuses across the East Coast and the Midwest. And in fact, he's given credit for essentially being one of the inventors of what we call the collegiate Gothic style. So if you go to most campuses nowadays, most of the buildings have a Gothic influence. He was one of the co-inventors of that type of design. And besides Steidle, he designed, I think, 14 different buildings on this campus, but some that we appreciate now today, Old Main. So after it burned down, he designed what is currently Old Main. Rec Hall, he designed the original part of Rec Hall. Nittany Lion Inn, he designed that. And then there was multiple other lab buildings and things that he did. And so, so the Steidle Building, what's really fascinating about it for me to try to wrap my head around is it housed the entire college, right? I mean, anybody in here knows the preciousness of space. And this building in its original form was the entire college, all 5 existing departments, in fact, because when Denny Steidle came on, there was geology, there was metallurgy, and there was what they call the mineral industries. And then he, under his time of leadership, they created meteorology and geography and brought those into the interdisciplinary fold. So beyond this building housing the entire college, which it did for over a decade. So I don't think the second building for the college came along until like 1939, 1940, somewhere in there. So for that time, this housed labs, a museum, the library. If you guys don't know the museum that's currently in the ground floor of Dyke, that was started, it was in this building. It is the largest museum solely dedicated to the mineral industries in the world. And it has one of the most extensive collections of artwork dedicated to that time period. And that was all Steidle. I mean, he was such a fanatic about his subject matter that he was a massive collector of art, books, prints, everything, right? And so in 1930, the library, which had been started before that by just collecting periodicals, actually moved into its official space, which we sit in today. So the library was this one large room here, and then on either side where we go out these doors were 2 smaller rooms, and that was the entire library until 1966. And when they began the library, it had an extensive collection of rare books and things of that nature, along the order of 5,000 volumes, they say. And by the time that the library moved out of here, it had well close to 20,000 volumes in this space, right? Don't know how they did that. But anyway, the rare book collection, which I found this fascinating, brings us to our third late president. So for those of you in the metallurgical field, you will know that the book De Re Metallica is the Bible of metallurgy. And one of the most famous translators of that book was Herbert Hoover. And so Herbert Hoover translated De Re Metallica into English. And it was, I mean, it was just a massive seed of expansion for metallurgy from that point forth. And so in this very library, we had both a copy of De Re Metallica and a copy of Herbert Hoover's translation of that book. And they both exist today in the archives of our library. So I thought that was really cool. Another really interesting thing, Linda Musser, the current head librarian, is only the 5th head librarian of the library in all that time. So, and she's been in that position now for, wow, I think almost 30 years. So very impressive. And so that's a big part of the history of this building. Some other interesting tidbits that you might not be aware of. What we currently know as the Materials Characterization Lab, which is housed in the bottom floor of the Millennium Science Complex, was born in this building in 1952. They didn't call it the Materials Characterization Lab. It took on that name in '89, but it basically inhabited most of the ground floor of this building and spread over into Hostler as that building was created. And so there's, yeah. So anyway, that's basically my somewhat brief history of the Steidle Building. This is a picture of Steidle shortly after it was completed in 2016, and we took occupancy. And it's, yeah, I stand by my words. It's, you know, the greatest department in the world. And you know, I hope you have now a little more appreciation for the fact that this just didn't come out of a vacuum, right? It comes from people that on the shoulders of which we stand, right? Which this room does. I mean, this room has housed a lot of PhD defenses and it's many, many decades, right? So this room, boy, the walls could talk, right? Holy cow. So anyway, thanks for your attention. And that is a brief history of Steidle.